Distinguished Chairman, for giving me this time. And when the regular order it comes back, I do want to speak in favor of the two Texas judges upon whom we're going to vote.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, of course I will speak further about Violence Against Women's Act because I believe the Leahy-Crapo et al. Bill has the best balance possible to protect the most people possible. But on the nominations today, we're finally going to vote on the nomination of Gregg Costa and David Guadarrama to fill judicial emergency vacancies in the U.S. District Courts, the Southern and Western Districts of Texas. They're judicial emergency vacancies. I mention that because these are more examples of what I've been concerned about for the last few years. Senate Republicans have simply refused to move promptly to confirm consensus nominees. These are nominees, like so many who President Obama has nominated, who are qualified. They enjoy bipartisan support. But they're made to wait and wait and wait and wait for finally being able to be confirmed. It's a destructive development. It's a new practice in the Senate. I can say this as one I've served here during the presidencies of President Ford, President Carter, President Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, and now President Obama. This new practice has kept the Senate behind the curve. It's kept federal judicial vacancies unfilled. It's overburdened the federal courts, and it's kept Americans from getting prompt justice. And I want to share with the Senate and the American people a chart. Look at this chart, Mr. President. This compares vacancies during the term of President Bush and President Obama. I mention this because look at where the vacancies were when President Bush came in. And for a short time, I was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. President Bush was president. Even though 60 nominees had been pocket filibustered to President Clinton's, I said, we're going to change this routine. Look how quickly I brought the vacancies down, way down, under President Bush. I then worked with the Republicans to bring them down further, even though they did not move as fast on President Bush's nominees as I had. And then back when I was chairman again, still continued to bring it down. But then what happened when President Obama came in? All of a sudden they said, well, this was great that you brought down the vacancies under President Bush. And we're glad to have the vacancies under President Bush come down, but now the vacancies are going to come back with President Obama. The two qualified nominees, and I agree these are highly qualified nominees from Texas, they were passed out of our committee way last year. They should have been confirmed last year. They're typical consensus, non-controversial nominees. They're delayed for no good reason. In fact, we have 24 judicial nominations currently before the Senate. You know, I've heard him say, well, you know, the president's got to set up more nominees. Why don't we confirm the 24 that are sitting here on the calendar? We're waiting for a final vote. And we have others working through the committee process. In fact, the 10 of those nominations, they've been pending the longest. Every single Democrat in this body has signed off on them. 10 that have been pending the longest are all to fill judicial emergency vacancies. So again, I show this chart. I show this to show how quickly Democrats moved, while Republicans did not move as quickly. They also moved for President Bush's nominees. But we did that with President Ford. We did that with President Carter. We did that with President Reagan. We did that with first President Bush. We did that with President Clinton, except for the 60 that were pocket filibustered by the Republicans. We did that. So just shown here with President Bush. Why does it have to be a different thing for President Obama? I mean, why can't we treat President Obama the way we did all these other presidents I've mentioned since I've been here? The way we did President Ford's nominations or all the others. I cannot understand what it is, why President Obama has to be treated differently. It's not fair to him, but more importantly, Mr. President, it's not fair to the federal judiciary. These vacancies mean that there are millions and millions of Americans, 100 million Americans, I believe it is? 150 million Americans are in districts or states with judicial vacancies. That means justice delayed. And if justice is delayed, justice is denied. Mr. President, we can and should do better. Maybe some feel that there's an advantage to take partisan shots at President Obama. I disagree. They should do as we have done in the past. Help the federal judiciary. That should be kept out of partisan politics. It's to our advantage, all of us. Because when you go before a court in this country, you're not asked whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You're coming to seek justice. You should be allowed to do that. So let's speed up. I will vote for these two judges. The two senators from Texas will vote for these two judges. But they were ready to be voted on way last year. Time to get moving. Mr. President, I yield the floor and reserve the balance of my time.
Mr. President.
I yield the floor and reserve the balance of my time.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise to speak in favor of Gregg Costa and David Guadarrama for nomination to the federal district bench. I do want to say that Mr. Costa, and I will mention this again, but Mr. Costa asked not to be confirmed until after the case that he was working on was finished, and his case was the prosecution of Allen Stanford, Robert Allen Stanford, who swindled so many Texans of money in which they had invested Texans and Americans. Frankly, he was all over the country in his representation. And Mr. Costa asked not to be confirmed until he could finish that case because it was complicated and he was the lead on it. So there has been no delay on our part at all on his nomination. And as I understand it, we have confirmed roughly the same number of district judges as President George Bush and President Clinton did in their first terms. And to my knowledge, we're not holding up nominations at all. And in fact, of course, Senator Cornyn and I both highly recommended Mr. Costa and Mr. Guadarrama to the President for his nomination because we have a process that assures that we nominate to the President the most qualified people who would fill these spots. And we have a bipartisan legal committee that vets them, people who know the legal community in Texas, and so therefore they know the reputations of these lawyers, and our committee system has worked very well. I did it with Senator Graham, I do it with Senator Cornyn, and we agree on the quality of these nominees. So I don't think there's a delay here, and I'm very pleased to be able to have nominated these two fine lawyers to the President. And I'd like to talk about Mr. Costa, who did ask to wait for his confirmation, but now is ready because the case was decided. He will be serving in the Southern District in Galveston, Texas, where I was born. Mr. Costa was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and grew up in Richardson, Texas. He attended Dartmouth College, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in government, and then continued his studies at the University of Texas School of Law, where he served as editor-in-chief of the Texas Law Review and received his Juris Doctorate with highest honors in 1996. Mr. Costa's professional career includes being a law clerk for Supreme Court Chief Justice William Rehnquist in 2001, as well as his current position serving as an Assistant United States Attorney in Houston. As the co-lead counsel for the United States in the prosecution of Robert Allen Stanford, Mr. Costa secured a conviction of 13 charges of conspiracy, wire, and mail fraud. Mr. Costa has been credited by his colleagues as the glue that held the case together. His dedication to this case and these victims shows the core of his character, and the fact that he asked for a delay in his confirmation because he wanted to finish this case and assure that it was done so that the convictions would be obtained, make me proud and pleased to support his nomination to the federal bench. I'm also pleased to support the nomination of Judge David Campos Guadarrama to the Western District of Texas in El Paso. Judge Guadarrama is originally from New Mexico and moved to El Paso, Texas at a young age. He attained 2 bachelor's degrees from New Mexico State University in political science and psychology, then earned his Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Notre Dame Law School in 1979. In 1987, Judge Guadarrama was appointed as the first Chief Public Defender of El Paso County and continued in that service until he was elected to the 243rd Judicial District Court in 1995. As a testament to his service to the El Paso community, Judge Guadarrama has served as a U.S. Magistrate Judge for the United States District Court for the Western District for the last 2 years. During his 3 decades serving in the Texas legal system, Judge Guadarrama has earned many accolades for his help and leadership in initiating and enacting several successful judicial programs in West Texas. He has demonstrated a strong commitment to the El Paso community, and I am confident he will serve on the federal bench well and support his nomination. Mr. President, I would just say that Senator Cornyn also supports these 2 judges. Of course, Senator Cornyn sits on the Judiciary Committee. Our Judicial Evaluation Committee, which is bipartisan and has served so well to give us the highest quality nominees on the bench, did select both of these nominees as their first choices after their interviews and the input from the legal community in both El Paso and Houston, which includes the Galveston part of the district. So they've been well vetted. They have been supported, I think, by both sides of the aisle. And we are very pleased to put forward these 2 quality nominees. And Senator Cornyn, as well, is very strongly in support of them. So with that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. We've been hearing debate about a couple of judicial nominations. A vote on those two nominations is expected at around noon Eastern Time. Later on in the day, more debate on reducing violence against women. Right now on C-SPAN 3, the Agriculture Committee is meeting to go over the Farm Bill section by section. We talked with a reporter earlier today about it. Chuck Abbott is on Capitol Hill covering the Farm Bill for Reuters. What are a few of the changes in the bill?
Well, excuse me. Most notably, the proposal being given to the committee by Chairman Stabenow will create a new farm support system. Since the 1930s, farm supports have been based on government attempts to prop up market prices. But with the particularly in the last 6 or 7 years, we've had a run of very high market prices, including usually we've had record high prices. And there's a belief that a new system would be a better choice, and this new system would be an insurance-like program which would protect farmer revenue against low prices and the effect of bad yields or bad weather. So that it's a more comprehensive approach to farm supports than has been used since farm subsidies began. That's the big thing in what's called the commodity title. In the conservation portion of the bill, there would be less land would be set aside for long-term, set aside from crops for long periods of time, and more attention would be paid on what is called working lands, which is the land that produces crops. And the idea is that there would be more of a focus of lower cost supports that encourages farmers to practice soil, water, and wildlife conservation as part of producing crops.
Well, it sounds like some major changes. How are groups reacting to it? What kind of lobbying is happening?
Well, as you know, the markup was delayed for a day, partly because some of the groups, particularly southern producers, rice and peanuts, were unhappy with what was in the bill. The approach that Chairwoman Stabenow is taking to what is called a shallow loss revenue protection program is most popular in the Midwest, which means it appeals to corn and soybean growers the most. It has some support from wheat growers. It's less popular in the South, where growers say crop insurance has not been a good deal for them, and so creating another program similar to crop insurance may have its drawbacks. And the rice growers particularly were upset because there was very little in the bill offered for them back in the fall during this super committee process. The leaders of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees tried balancing this all off by saying, okay, we'll give some crops higher target prices, which means a higher guaranteed price for their products, and we'll give other crops, the chance to use this revenue program. But those higher target prices were taken out of the bill that's being presented to the committee. The bill is some 900 pages long.
Can you give us an idea of the scope of the bill? How many people does it impact?
Oh, well, one could say that it impacts everybody in the United States because it affects food production. That's a simple but rather large expansive way of defining it. But it affects people who care about environmental protections because farmers control something like 900 million acres of land in the United States, which is a good chunk of the United States. And there's also a nutrition section in the bill, which most prominently is food stamps, or now it's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that affects somewhere around 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 Americans right now because of the high unemployment rate. There's also sections on as it's called energy, but it mostly means attempts to develop bioenergy, particularly in this case would be second generation biofuels, and to come up with biomass crops that could be another way for farmers to make money aside from traditional food crops. The bill has more than a dozen titles. I mean, there's research gets, there's mention of research projects. There's international food aid programs.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I know we're about to vote on these judges, and I would ask that my remaining time my statement be included as in morning business. Mr. President, the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence Against Women, which represents dozens of organizations from across the country, says, quote, the Grassley-Hutchinson substitute was drafted without input or consultation from the thousands of professionals engaged in this work every day. The substitute includes damaging and unworkable provisions that will harm victims, increase costs, and create unnecessary inefficiencies, close quote. Now, I know that it was well-intentioned by its lead sponsors, but the Republican proposal is no substitute for the months of work we have done in a bipartisan way, both Republicans and Democrats coming together, working with victims and advocates from all over the country. And I regret to say the Republican proposal undermines core principles of the Violence Against Women Act. It would result in abandoning some of the most vulnerable victims and strips out key provisions that are critically necessary to protect all victims, including battered immigrants, Native women, and victims in same-sex relationships. The improvements in the bipartisan Leahy-Crapo Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, they're gone from the Republican proposal. It is no substitute. It does nothing to meet the unmet needs of victims.
Question is on the Costa nomination.
That's yeas and nays.
Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Baucus, Begich, Bingaman, Brown of Massachusetts, Brown of Ohio, Chambliss, Coburn, Collins, Coons, Corker, Cornyn, Franken, Grassley, Harkin, Heller, Hutchison, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson of South Dakota, Leahy, Murkowski, Nelson of Florida, Sanders, Shelby, Snow, Tester, Thune, Udall of New Mexico, Vitter. No senator voted in the negative. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar, Aye. Mr. Sessions, aye. Mr. Casey, aye. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Mr. Dement, no. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, aye. Mr. Conrad, aye. Mr. Pryor, aye. Mr. McCain, aye. Mr. Rubio, aye. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, aye. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mr. Burr, aye. Miss Ayotte, aye. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, aye. Mr. Levin, aye. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Udall, Colorado, aye. Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Cole,
I'm ready for you.
aye. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Wyden, aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mr. Cochran, aye. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mrs. Murray, aye. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Blunt, Aye. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts. Aye. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso. Aye. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander. Aye. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye. Aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer. Aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka. Aye. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb. Aye. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coates. Aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin. Aye. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg. Aye. Ms. Mikulski. Ms. Mikulski. Aye. Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul. Aye. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey. Aye. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey. Aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch. Aye. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu. Aye. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran. Aye. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller. Aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven. Aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse. Aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch. Aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo. Aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand. Aye. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Portman, aye. Mr. Enzi, aye. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Kyle, aye.
Are there any senators wishing to vote or to change their vote? Seeing none, on the confirmation of Gregg Jeffrey Costa of Texas, the yeas are 97, the nays are 2. The nomination is confirmed.
Madam President,
The Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate resumes legislative session, the period for debate only on S. 1925 be extended until 2:30 p.m. today, with time equally divided between 2 leaders of the designees, and that I would be recognized at 2:30 p.m. today.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. Under the previous order, the question is on the Guadarrama nomination. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
I just wanted to compliment you on your pronunciation of his last name. Very good.
Thank you. Under the previous order, the motions to reconsider are considered made and laid upon the table. The President will be immediately not notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate will resume legislative session. Like a 5-minute. Amy.
Madam President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to speak on an issue that is profoundly important and meaningful to this body. At this moment in history, we face a critical juncture in the nation's history when we must, and we absolutely must, renew the Violence Against Women Act and indeed strengthen it for the sake of women, but also our families around Connecticut and this country. I want to thank my colleagues for voting to proceed with consideration of S. 1925, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. VAWA is critically important. It is bipartisan legislation that gives victims of domestic violence and sexual assault access to the services that they so desperately need. This crucial law supports both the organizations that provide these services and the law enforcement agencies that assist the victims as they pursue justice. And as a law enforcement official, I saw firsthand in my duties as State Attorney General for Connecticut how important and practical and meaningful this law is. We have a responsibility not only to authorize but also to strengthen VAWA right away. Some 17 years have passed since the original Violence Against Women Act, and we've made great strides, but we cannot be complacent in our efforts to protect our nation's children and women. In a time when the women of our great nation face relentless attacks on their rights, we cannot afford to lose ground that we have gained over the last 17 years. We must address the grave concerns of domestic violence and sexual assault, which are in no way partisan. There is nothing Republican or Democrat about a victim who suffers from this grave ill, as Chairman Leahy has so eloquently and powerfully stated. S. 1925 is a bipartisan bill written over months of negotiations and consultations with critical law enforcement and victims advocacy groups, and it supports a number of organizations in my home state of Connecticut whose mission is to protect women who experience violence in all forms. This bill provides resources to help a number of organizations in Connecticut fulfill their vital mission to protect more than 54,000. I'm going to repeat that because that is a staggering number. 54,000 domestic violence victims in Connecticut alone. Organizations in Connecticut received nearly $5 million in fiscal year 2011 from the Violence Against Women Act. But many domestic programs in Connecticut and around the country are reporting huge staff shortages and resources needs that are necessary to respond to the hundreds of thousands of women in need. It is truly an epidemic in this country that we must counter and fight just as we would an epidemic of infectious bacteria or other kinds of insidious sources. VAWA would give these service providers the resources they need to protect women, men, children, victims of domestic and sexual violence. And we have the opportunity to commit to end domestic violence with updates and stronger measures in this act. First, on accountability, I am pleased that S. 1925 builds on the accountability provisions in current law so we can make sure that VAWA grant money is used effectively and efficiently to support victims. On Internet abuse, a new frontier in the fight against domestic violence and sexual assault, we must strengthen provisions dealing with Internet abuse to protect women and others from those kinds of threats, intimidation, harassment, even physical assaults facilitated by the Internet. Domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking can be even more dangerous and more threatening on the Internet age, requiring broader and stronger protections. We must protect the thousands of women who fall victim every year to violent crimes cyberstalking, and impersonation, with consequences that are truly horrific and reprehensible. I'm proud to have introduced a companion bill to the Violence Against Women Act that enhances current law for the Internet age. This legislation, the Internet Abuse Act, expands the ability of law enforcement to prosecute criminals who use the Internet to intimidate, threaten, harass, and facilitate acts of sexual violence against women, children, and others. The VAWA proposal before us includes key concepts from the Internet Abuse Act, such as one key provision that strengthens existing criminal provisions against cyberstalking. We must take this act to the new frontier of Internet abuse and make it real against the very pernicious and reprehensible cyberstalking, cyber harassment, cyber assault that is as much a fact of life as the older forms of domestic abuse. This provision gives law enforcement the ability to go after more real instances of criminal harassment and abuse online. And I want to stress, at the same time, the provision dramatically strengthens free speech protections. Currently, the government can prosecute individuals for merely annoying online communications, as well as communications that may be generally offensive, but not directed at a specific person. This provision removes those authorities from the law so that prosecutors will spend their limited resources focusing on real causes of harassing and abusive conduct online. The law also focuses on vulnerable populations. As we strengthen VAWA, we must ensure that all victims of domestic violence are protected and have access to the services that they need. Although VAWA has been strengthened and updated in every past reauthorization, the needs of some of our most vulnerable communities still have not been fully addressed. An example, elder abuse. Though the VAWA reauthorization in 2000 included provisions to deal with domestic abuse in later life, our nation's elders continue to be victims of domestic violence. I am pleased that provisions that I drafted with my distinguished colleague, Senator Cole, which improve the protections for elder victims of domestic abuse, have been included in this reauthorization of VAWA. LGBT protections. It would be simply unconscionable to deny any victim of domestic violence the support he or she needs. For that reason, I strongly support the provisions that ensure that all victims of domestic violence, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, have access to life-saving services. We are talking about life-saving services. Nobody ever asked, in my experience, what the sexual orientation of a victim was when that person was, in fact, battered, brutalized, and there should be no such question that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered individuals experience domestic violence at the same rate as the general population. And yet these individuals face discrimination as they attempt to access victim services. That should not be acceptable in this country. In fact, a survey found 45% of LGBT victims were turned away when they sought help from a domestic violence shelter. Clearly, there's a real need to improve the access and availability of services for this vulnerable population, and I support measures in the Act that ensure that victims of domestic and sexual violence, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identification, can access those services they need. There are protections in addition, broader protections for Native American communities. S. 1925 makes great improvements to the law enforcement tools available to Native American populations, and members of the Tribal Council of the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, a great tribal nation in Connecticut, have appealed to me to protect the tribal provisions in S. 1925 and make sure that any amendments are barred if they weaken those protections. In short, All victims of domestic violence deserve access to the services that they need, and many of my colleagues here today, I know, agree. In fact, 61 from both sides of the aisle have signed on to the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, and I thank every single one of them for stepping forward and speaking out on this profoundly meaningful and important issue. We have the opportunity to work to eliminate domestic and sexual violence, which is a scourge in our society, costly in suffering as well as dollars. And I encourage my colleagues to keep faith with the hundreds of thousands of victims who look to us for the support that they need. We must vote as soon as possible, hopefully today, to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
The Senator from Iowa.
Madam President, I've seen the good